the reason why influencer is a terrible word is because it talks about the effect, not the cause. You know, I'm 35 now, but I'm also like a guy who's a married guy with 2 kids who like lives in a house in New York City, who like doesn't party or drink alcohol or do drugs or really do anything that you would describe as fun, except for maybe every once in a while in the afternoon play like 25 minutes of Call of Duty, only if Sam's next door and he'll come play with me, and like there's no phone calls before or after and it's not a big deal. But like I have found in the last year that I am now an adult. And when I think about how I got to this place right now, it has enabled me or forced me to sort of look back at my life and say, how did I possibly get here? And there's a lot I learned from that. Okay, so how you get from A to B. I made that movie at like a kind of a strange place in my career where I had spent a decade working with my big brother Van, and we were fine artists because we didn't know what else to call ourselves, and we went from museums and art galleries to maybe making some TV commercials that were really, really horrible, but they hired us for whatever reason and their checks always cleared. And then did some more experimental work, and my brother and I, we ran the gambit of what you could do pre-YouTube when you had 2 guys, 2 video cameras, and a couple computers that could edit on them. And we took that all the way to HBO. We took that all the way to that guy that I told you, Tom Scott, saying, I love what you do. What could we do together? And I said to him, just give us enough money to survive for a year, and we'll make all this work, and then we'll figure out what to do with it. And that's what we did. And then at the end of that year, we formed and pattied it together into something that looked like a TV show that HBO bought for $2 million. And it was this huge, like, we had made it. And that was in 2008 when HBO bought the show. And then all this like bad stuff happened, and the head of programming for HBO left the job, and she bought our show, but they still wanted the show, and then it took 2 years before they put it on air. Within that 2 years, my brother and I made the decision to stop working together. It was all this stuff, but where it left me was in early 2011, realizing I hadn't actually made anything in like 3 years, and I kind of felt like a loser. And I started a YouTube channel called Casey Neistat, not called the Neistat Brothers. It was my channel. I was really insecure about it. And I started putting videos up on that YouTube channel, and I remember summer 2011 was the same time that my HBO show like was on. It was like I literally was a guy who had a show on HBO that I wrote, directed, and starred in that was on every week, and I had a YouTube channel with like 30 subscribers. And I was like, man, this sucks. And I was beating myself up about it, and then I got like a bike ticket. I got a ticket for riding my bike. I was really upset. And I went and I shot that movie with my friend, Oscar. Maybe you've seen him in some of the vlogs. And we made that movie for like 40 bucks. And I say 40 bucks, so the bike broke halfway through. We had to fix the tires, like 40 bucks. Shot it on a point and shoot, and we put it on the internet, and it exploded. I mean, exploded. I remember the mayor of New York City at the time, Michael Bloomberg, being asked in a press conference about that video. And I was like, yeah. But the biggest thing that came from that was I got a phone call from an editor at the New York Times, and he was like, we're doing this thing at the New York Times, videos, and they're opinion focused, and we loved your Bike Lanes movie. And I was like, you got the wrong, this is the guy who made the movie where I crashed my bike into a cop car. You sure you want to talk to me? And he was like, yes, we love that. Would you make movies like that for us? And the reason why I say inflection point is because I wasn't sure what to do. My brother and I had found what I thought was the absolute apex of success in the HBO show. 3 years went by, sort of sitting on my hands, started putting these little movies up on YouTube. And then all of a sudden, what I always knew as, and I still believe is the most prestigious news outlet in the world, that is the New York Times, wanted me to make videos for them, and they were going to pay me for that. And it was a huge deal. So the reason why I put so much emphasis on this story as the prime example of my career, how do you get from here to how do you get from there, is I remember being on the phone with Lindsay, who was like the junior editor at the Times, who would help me. And her and I got to be friends, and we were chit-chatting, and I was like, how do you get a job at the New York Times? And she was like, I went to Harvard, and I majored in journalism. And she's like, and I've committed my life to this. And that's how I got this job as a junior editor at the New York Times. And she was like, how did you get this job at the New York Times? I was like, I crashed my bike into a cop car. So that's why that movie is such a literal representation of getting from somewhere where you are to somewhere you want to be and having no idea what the right trajectory is. Because if you ask me how you could get a gig at the New York Times, I would probably respond to you by saying, go to Harvard. But I didn't have that opportunity. So by hustling, by doing the only thing I knew how to do, doors opened for me that I couldn't have otherwise imagined. So with that, following that trajectory, like that kind of video got a lot of attention, a lot of eyeballs, and people were looking at me. And then I started making movies for the New York Times, and those would get a lot of attention by smart people who didn't waste their time on YouTube. Yeah. But would actually see videos on the New York Times, and it sort of elevated who I was, what I represented, and what I could do. And along with that came some real opportunities in the advertising space. Now, my career in advertising up till this point was basically directing really terrible TV commercials that none of you have seen. My mantra about the ad world was a line that I stole from the Beastie Boys, where I said, like, the world of advertising is a nice place to visit, but a better place to rob, because it was just an easy way to get paid for me. But I was really embarrassed about the work that I did there, because what working in advertising was for me up until that time was they'd have like a script, then they'd have a shot list, and then they'd have like a storyboard, which is literally like pictures of what every shot should look like. And you'd show up on set and you'd be like, I'm here, ready to express myself artistically and creatively. And they're like, cool, here, do this. And it was just like, I felt like a robot could do it. But it was a means to an end. It was a way of getting paid. But as my YouTube videos, as these kinds of videos really took off, they really found their footing. Agencies, advertisers, clients, companies would see them and they'd be like, he's capturing this tremendous audience, making work like this. What could he do for us? And they would call me in and sometimes they would say, like, how about doing this just like you'd do it for you? And I was like, no, this doesn't work. And I remember pitching this idea of like, why don't you just, to my agent, like, why don't you just get them to give me their money and then I'll go make a video and I'll like do it for them, but the way I do it for me. And them sort of like scratching their heads and being like, that will never work. And I like fired them. I stopped working with them right then and there. And I started to pursue that. And it came to a head when I was able to get this gig with Nike. Now, Nike had done a little project in New York City, and they asked me to make a bike movie, because they saw this bike movie, for their little event. I made them this little bike movie. They loved it. There was like no budget. It was like a cool event for like 50 like bearded New York City skateboarding hipsters, but it went over really well. And they were like, we want to do a bigger campaign with you. And I was like, great. But there was no agency. There was no one involved. They're like, so what would you do and how much money would you need? And I was like, yikes. So I gave them some ideas for some videos that they loved. It was to launch one product. And I gave them, I remember they asked me for a budget and I didn't know how to do a budget. So I literally sent them a single number. That's it. They're like, everybody loves the ideas. We're signed off. Let's do it. We want to make all 3 videos. This is perfect. Just let us know the budget. So I just like replied inline email with a number and click send. And they came back like a week later and they're like, yeah, I guess that's fine. I don't know. And so the gig was to make 3 videos. And I had scripts for all 3. The script was like a single piece of paper that was like, here's what the video would look like. And if I had to write a script for that, I'd be like, I'm upset about a New York City cop. I get a ticket from a cop, and then I'm gonna ride my bike, crash it into stuff. It will be funny, period. Casey Neistat. Like that's what a Casey script looks like. I don't know how to write a script. And that's sort of what these 3 scripts look like that I sent to Nike, and they're like, we get it, we love it, love the energy. So I spent like 4 months making the first 2 videos, and they were great, and they're both on my YouTube channel, and I'm really proud of them. The second of which had like their huge like huge athletes in it, like a US football player, an Olympic athlete, like the best skateboarder in the world. One funny thing is like, they really rode me about like, Casey, when you're around these athletes, we can only get you a certain amount of time, they're under contracts and all this, like you have to know what you're doing. And I was like, cool. And they gave me like this big NFL star and we had no plan, I had no idea what I was doing. And we walked by like a high school and I was like, let's go into the high school. And he was like, sure. And we like went to the high school and like hung out with all these like high schoolers and they were psyched to meet him and it was like this huge deal. And we made the video and Nike's like, you know that in order for us to get permission to use that footage, we bought that high school a new scoreboard for their football field. You know, and then they were like, this is why we like to know ahead of time. And I was like, I totally understand. So it came time to make the third video. And now just to set this up a little bit more, this was a couple years after I had done that. This is when I was really finding my own footing. And this was right after I sort of made this decision to myself that I was going to pursue a new kind of work, that I didn't want to make crappy TV commercials anymore, but I wanted to do stuff that I really believed in. And I had made these two videos that I liked, but it came time to make the third video. And I remember like, I called my editor, who's also one of my closest friends, and I was like, Maxie, instead of making the video that like I wrote, like the script, the treatment that I wrote, I have this other idea, but it's not really an idea for a video. I just think it'd be a fun way to spend their budget. And I was like, is there any way you can like just disappear with me for like the next couple weeks? Like, we'll just take off. And he was like, yeah, man, what do you want to do? And I was like, okay, this has like always been a dream of mine. And they gave me all that budget up front, like literally like wired 100% of the budget to me. Don't ever do that. And I was like, okay, here's what I want to do. It's something I've always wanted to do. Let's just go to the airport and buy a plane ticket to wherever the next flight out is. And then we'll go to that place till we're bored. And then we'll do that again to wherever the next flight. And we'll just keep doing that till we completely run out of money. And he was like, yeah, man, let's do it. But what about the Nike video? And I was like, we'll figure that out. We got the budget. And so that's what we did. And the spoiler alert, like the movie came out great. It was like one of the most successful videos that Nike's ever done. It was like this huge, huge, huge deal. But there was a real moment, and by moment I mean like 3.5 months, where we had come back from what was the most fun, expensive vacation we'd ever had. And we were just sitting on like 2 hard drives worth of footage, being like, what have we done? It's like we'd have a whole bunch of footage of Maxie and Casey on vacation. And like, I remember little things like vividly. I remember we were supposed to premiere this video at South by Southwest. And the date kept approaching and approaching and approaching. And Nike was like, look, we trust you. We don't even have to see it. So if you can have it done by, and we missed it. We didn't even show it. Like we didn't have it done. We were going to premiere it in New York City over this big project. We didn't have it done. I remember the Nike executives showing up. Alex Lopez, awesome guy. The guy who greenlit the whole thing shows up in my office and just like standing over my shoulder. And Max, as we're like on the computers, and he's like, in the most polite way he could possibly be, like, what is this? What am I looking at? And we had no idea. That gigantic sinkhole that I jumped into, I saw that on like a BuzzFeed list of like craziest places to swim in the world. And I was like, let's go here. And it was in Oman in the Middle East. I think it's called like the Bakhmini sinkhole or something like that. And we got tremendously lost going there. We had one day. We didn't want to be stuck in the Middle East for 2 days. We were running out of money. We spent like 8 hours driving through the desert. We finally find this place. It's not like a national park. There's no signs or anything. Like we pull up to it and like climb all the way to the bottom, set the cameras up, run all the way up to the top, and look over and I was like, Max, it's too high. And Max was like, Casey, do you see the shadow line? He's like, you literally have 2 minutes to jump or you're gonna be completely in the dark. And I was like, okay. And I walk over to the edge like this. And this is one of the scariest moments of my life. So that video was a huge smash hit. It was viral. It was all over the place. It was on the news. It was like, brought me in to be interviewed. It was like, Nike had this entire marketing strategy behind it where it was going to be like, hashtag something, travel like Casey, and the minute it launched, they canceled everything. And they're like, we just have to let this go. Like, we've never seen anything take off like this. And I think up until the World Cup, the following World Cup, that was their most watched video they'd ever put on the internet. And before I posted, I was like, guys, you mind like me telling the story that like you didn't say this was okay? And they're like, this is why we wanted to work with you, man. And I was like, well, that's why Nike is Nike. But more than that, it was a real sort of validation of what it means to follow sort of your instincts. And that is a very literal, very risky, very dangerous way to do that. And I mean that both metaphorically and literally. But a very risky way to do that. Here I was sort of, I was setting off on my independent career, my own career then. I'd been given the chance of a lifetime to work for the brand of a lifetime, and I literally stole their entire budget to go on vacation. Had I not delivered, they probably would have been like, okay, because the budget was still less than what they spend on snacks on a typical commercial. But even so, it would have meant burning a relationship with the most sought-after brand in the business and squandering an opportunity. But I still felt the need to sort of take it on, and that's what it yielded. And what that did in my career, that was another one of those inflection points, is immediately after that I got calls from everyone, and they all said the same thing, like, hey, do that for us. And that was really fun for a couple of years. Because I'd always say yes, and then go do something different, and the client would be happy, and I was like, this is insane. Like, I'm figuring out how to make money just making my crazy videos. And that's all I did. That was all I did. And I did that for about 2 years, and then I got really, really bored of it. I would make a branded video like that, which would be enough money for like 3 months, and I'd make cool YouTube videos, and then that money would sort of fade. Now, take on another gig, continue that, and it got to a place where I felt like I was no longer exercising my ambition. I felt like I wanted more, and I wasn't getting it. And then somehow, out of the blue, out of nowhere, I get a phone call from a guy named Sepp Kamvar, and Sepp is a professor at MIT. And long story long, they invited me to MIT. They offered me a fellowship at MIT. The fellowship was it was paid for by the Rockefeller Foundation. It was organized by the Sundance Institute, like the Sundance Film Festival, the Sundance Institute, and it was being put on by MIT. Now, those are like three entities that I had to like Wikipedia to understand just how big of a deal they all were. And they had chosen me as the filmmaker that they wanted to hand a fellowship to and bring me to MIT, which of course I took. And from a very uninteresting career perspective, that means putting my entire company, everything on hold, earning no money, like literally going and staying on campus in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and going back, like literally showing up in a classroom, in a lab, like a science lab, every day. And that's what I did. And I remember like explaining that to Candace. It was right after we got married, and she was like, "You want to do what now?" She was like, "You want to go to college, Kate?" And I was like, "Yeah, this feels right." And I remember being there, and it was all postgrads. It was all students that were there that had all already graduated from MIT or an equally prestigious university. And I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. And I remember like talking to my professor, and as he and I got closer and closer, and I was like, why me? And he had a flattering, very kind answer. I think the previous person that they had engaged with, the previous person that had done a similar fellowship was J.J. Abrams. So I was like, why me? And he gave me that flattering explanation, but then at the end of that, he kind of started laughing as he's like eating his fancy food over lunch, and he was like, Casey, you're the only high school dropout who's also an MIT fellow. Like, well, that's great. And I think that is also another one of those examples of like, how do you get to be a part of, in any capacity, one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the world? I don't know. I did it by stealing money from Nike and going on vacation. Don't do that. But I'm just trying to really illustrate that the path from A to B is never what you expect it to be. But part of the reason why I went there, beyond the fact that you'd be a total idiot not to, but part of the reason why I did that is because I was exhausted of making these branded spots. I wanted to figure out what was next. Like, this is when I was now in my 30s. I was 32 at the time, and I was like, I need to figure out what this next step is. I know what I want, now it's time to do. And I was like, this time at MIT, not working, not doing what I've always done, will force a reset in my life, in my career, that will map the trajectory for what's next. And what's next is that phase in your life where you're not figuring it out, you're doing it. And Candace, my wife, was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but have a great time in Cambridge, Casey. And I went there and I just watched and I looked around, and I'd never been surrounded by so many people that were so much smarter than me. Normally I'm surrounded by people that are just a little bit smarter than me, like today and every time I'm on a bus or on an airplane or anytime I'm in public. But this was like a collection of the world's greatest minds in one building, and then me. And I spent a lot of time looking around, and I realized something very, very naive and kind of stupid, which was that like technology, this thing that they do there, the name, is the power of it is limitless. And that's like such a naive thing to say. It's like a platitude. It doesn't mean anything. But for someone who's always been so cognizant of the limitations of what making video can do, all of a sudden I was like, tech, anything's possible. And then at the same time, I read this book called Hatching Twitter. Great book. Nick Bilton wrote it. You should read it. It's about the origin of Twitter, how Twitter went from nothing to what it is now. And what I took away from the book is that those guys are idiots just like me. They're no smarter than me. And I know Jack Dorsey. Jack's sort of a friend of mine, the CEO of Twitter. Very smart guy. But I read the book, and I was like, okay, he got at the Twitter launch party, he got really drunk and like busted his face open, and the whole launch was a failure. I was like, I can do that. And that's when I decided. I was like, I want to be a technology entrepreneur. That's what I want to do. And I was like, I even have an idea how to do it. It has to do with video. And I pitched this to like my professor, and he was like, great, is this an idea or is this a business? And I was like, it's a business, Sep. And he was like, fantastic. And I was like, what do I do? And he's like, you need to raise money. And I was like, okay, how do I do that? And he walked me through the steps. And then right then and there, he was like, and I want to be your first investor, Casey. I want to be your first investor. Here's $100,000. This guy's a professor. Like he's not a zillionaire. He's not a rich man. And that's when I was like, oh, like I guess like failure. At that moment, like the minute I accept this man's money, someone who I respect, number 2 on the list of 2 people I've ever met in my life that I would call a mentor, I was like, I can't let him down if I like slide that check closer to if I take that. And that was that was terrifying. That was a terrifying moment, but I did it. And then I just sort of ran around, asked everybody else I knew for money. Gary Vaynerchuk, I asked for money. I remember Gary, I asked him for money, and I pitched him on my idea. And much like everybody else, halfway through my like pitch, he just glazed over, and I knew he had no idea what I was talking about. Like I completely lost him. And at the end, he was like, okay, great. He was like, I'm in. How much can I be in for? And I think I said, I don't know what I said, but I probably said $100,000. And he was like, I want to give you 500,000. And I was like, Gary, do you know, like, what is it? And he said something really profound to me. He was like, Casey, I'm betting on the jockey, not on the horse. He's like, I don't know what it is that you're going to do, what it is that you're going to build, but I'm betting on you. And, like the next 2 years were me going back to New York City and trying to find somebody to help me build this. I've never written a line of code in my life. And I met a guy named Matt who I completely fell in love with, who quit his job and was like, let's do this. He and I became partners. We put our heads down. We went and we built a totally broken, I'm going to make a video about this because it's a total scam, what we did. We never had a pitch deck when we were fundraising. Like we never had a proposal. We built an app that was not a real app. It was fake. Where it was like, it looked sort of like an app, like a Snapchat or a Twitter or something you've seen, but it was like you touch on one of the cells on it and like a video starts playing, and like it's a really impressive little app. And we preloaded all the videos, and then we we faked the whole thing, but we never told them that it was fake. And we even knew that they would press a certain spot because that's what everybody pressed. It's like when they say pick a card, any card, and they know which card you're gonna pick. We knew what button people were gonna pick, and we put the most sensational video and we just did that. We did it to everybody. And like, we eventually raised like $3 million to build this thing. And we built this crazy app. And before we launched it, 2 months before we launched it, I said to Matt, I was like, Matt, we need like a huge platform to launch this with. And I was like, I made some cool virals and I'll make a viral video for this, but it's not enough. I was like, I have this idea to make a reality TV show about our startup that will get people excited about what we're doing, and then they'll download the app, and that's how we'll do this. And then like 15 minutes into making that, I was like, God, it's really boring in this office all day, every day. So I turned the camera on myself, and that was sort of how the vlog was born, a daily show that was about me. And I was able to lean into my company and like wild success, the launch of Beam, of my company, one of the most successful app launches of the year. And you know, there was ups and downs of the company over the next couple years, but I would say as the realization that our app that I had at that point taken almost $4 million from other people's money, OPM, it's a good one to know. I'm down with OPM. That this app was not going to succeed. Like this app, like we were getting our butts handed to us by Snapchat. Like there's no, like we're not going to win this game. But at the same time, the vlog was taking off in a way that I could never have imagined. And I was like, okay, what is the link between me making videos on YouTube and us having a failed piece of software? Like, what do we do here? And I had no idea. But again, like, how do you become a successful technology entrepreneur? I don't know. I mean, I bet if you were to go to school, they'd give you some trajectory. But for me, the recipe was by making more stupid YouTube videos. And I remember as we were in the final throes of trying to sell Beam, like figuring out a way out, I met with the CEO of CNN. And he sort of said, he was like, we had this great conversation, and he was like, we didn't meet about Beam, we were meeting about other stuff. And he was like, what can I do to get you to come work for CNN? And I was like, nothing. I was like, I don't want to be on TV. And he was like, okay. And then I was like walking out the door, and I was like, you know what, your technology sucks. I was like, and I mean that, like a CNN's app, it's okay, it's getting there. But I was like, you know, what you don't have is a startup mentality here. What you don't have is a young, fresh set of eyes focused on technology. I was like, that's what this company is missing. And he lit up, and he was like, okay. And then this big conversation took place, and I started meeting with all of his counterparts. And they absolutely loved what we had built. And our product didn't succeed, but what we did was we demonstrated an understanding in a space that is the most mysterious, video and mobile, no one knows that, but we did something that people really liked. And just because like we lost the fight didn't mean we lost the war. Like we had built incredible technology and they loved it. And they fell in love with it. And they're like, we want to do more. Like we want to work with your entire team. What can we do here? And at the end of that story is CNN buying Beam for $25 million. And they didn't buy the app. Like we shut the app down, like the app's dead. They didn't buy the app, but what they bought was this vision that we had as a company. And they believed in that vision so much that, you know, like we don't work out of CNN, we stay in our offices, we don't answer to CNN. They just want us to do what we've been doing, and they want us to operate how we've been operating. And they're giving us these kinds of freedoms to continue what we did because we tried once and it didn't succeed. That doesn't mean we failed at all. It's like, how many of you guys remember Odeo? Do you guys love Odeo, that website? It's crickets. Odeo was a failed podcasting website, but after it failed, then they built another website. That was called Twitter. And then there's like Bourbon. Do you guys download Bourbon? Probably not, because it didn't go very far. But after Bourbon failed, they turned it into Instagram. And that is what CNN bet on. It's like, okay, you tried something, it didn't work, but you showed us something. We saw something there that was amazing. And we've seen what you've been able to do in media. What do you want to do next? And I said, here's what I want to do next. And they said, okay. And they bought the company, and they sort of rolled out the CNN red carpet for us to do that. And that's where we are now. So when I sort of say as an adult that I'm able to stand here and look back, that's what I see. But when I look to what's next, I see like more opportunity and more possibility than I've ever seen before in my career. And the comfort that I take in looking back at what brought me to this position of success, it was the fact that I never had an idea what I was doing. And now, instead of being scared of that, I embrace that. I hold it as close to me as I possibly can. And that is what we're taking on this new mission, on this new thing that we have all of CNN's resources, all of their energy, we have all of their access, we have everything we need in the world to make something great. All we have to do is do it. And when the CEO of CNN or anybody else says, okay, great, how do you do that? My answer is always the same, which is like, I don't know. But I have no doubt that we will find that path. I never know what I'm doing with production, and I think when it comes to technology as a whole in video production, it's a race to the bottom. I mean, my cell phone, that cell phone in your hand, they shoot 4K video that's incredible. And what most people don't know is like literally half of my vlog was shot on a cell phone. Like half of every episode was shot on a cell phone. People don't know, people don't care. The race to the bottom means the technology, the hardware itself, this stupid stuff. Like I like it because I like tech and I'm a nerd, but like it's just going to disappear. And it's going to be understood that everything's going to look great. So it's like we all get the same tool. And what can you do with it? But the tool itself is now egalitarianized. It is now a true meritocracy. Everybody gets the same tool. And like with that tool, you can like wage war and build an empire. Or with that tool, you can like shoot a stupid cat video that like goes viral and I'll end up watching 100 times. There is tremendous value in beautiful productions. I love them. I appreciate them. But that doesn't mean that an incredible story can't be told using the most primitive technology. One example, my favorite example, is I saw this Mike Tyson documentary. This is a couple years ago in the theaters at an independent theater in New York City. And then the same day, because Candace had just broken up with me, so I like go to movies by myself. The same day, I went and saw Transformers 3 or whatever the hell it was. And so I watched this movie that was literally just a camera fixed on one man's face as he was talking for 2 hours. And then the next movie was a $200 million production, the most ambitious CGI in the history of cinema. I fell asleep in Transformers, and I was fixated by Mike Tyson's stories. So it is always the quality of what is delivered, not how it's delivered. But then the nuance of that doesn't mean that it invalidates one or the other. Like Jackson Pollock dripped paints and you know, like, yeah, it's always what you do with it. I mean, one, I think influencer is a horrible word. I hate that word influencer, but it is real. I think the reason why influencer is a terrible word is because it talks about the effect, not the cause. It's like, it would be like calling a musician an ear pleaser, you know? Or like someone who paints portraits like an eye pleaser. Like it's what it, influence is what it does if you create stuff that affects people. That's neither here nor there, but you know, I don't think like, there's a lot of talk, what's your name? What Kevin was saying is like, in the ad industry right now, like the biggest topic of conversation is influencer marketing because it's disrupting the entire marketing market as a whole. Before you would do buys, media buys, you would do them on television, you would do billboard buys, you would do magazine buys because that's where the eyeballs were. Now eyeballs are on people that are using Snapchat really well, doing YouTube really well, working in other genres where the creator is also controlling the distribution. And the big fat question mark that Kevin asked is like, is there value there? And the answer is absolutely. The reason why it's disrupting the industry so profoundly is because unlike a blank billboard that you just pay and you put your ad up there, that influencer is also having a huge hand in dictating the creative behind that distribution. And what that does is it makes the creative industry, the advertising industry, vulnerable because you don't need agencies, you just call Casey. You don't need agencies, just call Michelle. Just call Michelle so you can get on her channel. And that is the disruption that you're seeing. And I think that it's valid, I think that it matters, I think that it's right, I think that it's effective, but I also completely empathize with people in the ad space that are made nervous by it because it's unaccountable, it's reckless, it's inconsistent, there's no way to really like attribute ROI. It's a much, much more complex monster because it's like, there's no head on that snake. It's like an army of 10,000 soldiers without a single general or a single country that they're fighting for. Everyone is rogue in the influencer space. Oh, easy question. So the question was like, what's the one tip for people, clients, brands, agencies that are considering working with influencer marketers? And that answer is do the work. Do the work. Like, why is it that there are 10 influencers? I mean, I'm one of them, so I'm not complaining. But why is it there are 10 influencers that get 99% of the work? And it's because people in the ad space, one, I think they're scared of working with people that are unknowns. And two, it's like there's maybe a reluctance to actually get out there, get your hands dirty, and find people that are making the kind of content that works best for you. Like if your job is selling tampons, don't go to the biggest skateboarder on YouTube and be like, hey man, we know you have an audience of 13-year-old boys, will you help us sell them maxi pads? Like, it doesn't work. Like, know your audience and know who these influencers speak to and how it can be effective. And I think that is something that's tremendously overlooked in the industry. I think numbers are what's looked at and not impact. My channel, I was doing close to 7-figure deals on my YouTube channel when I had 400,000 subscribers. And it was because of the quality of the work and the way it was impacting people and affecting people.